The barren landscape stretched endlessly in every direction. Jagged mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks swallowed by a swirling dust storm. The air was thin, but it carried the faint scent of ozone and something more pungent, burning metal. The ground beneath his boots crunched, a constant reminder of the alien world he had come to claim as his. Anderson, an ex-soldier from Earth, had been on this planet for months now. He was used to the harsh environment, but the loneliness still clawed at him. He wasn't here for fame, riches, or glory. He was here for something much more personal. For the first time in a long while, the mission was his to control, and he wasn't going to let anyone stand in his way. His prosthetic arm, a sleek piece of advanced human engineering, moved fluidly beside him, but it didn't feel like it used to. When he first got it, it was a symbol of survival. Now it was a painful reminder of everything he had lost. His real arm torn away in a firefight against the very enemy he was about to face. He looked across the horizon, his eyes narrowing. There, among the jagged rocks and twisted metal, was a fortress, an alien stronghold. Though a race known for their cruelty and propaganda-driven control had taken everything from him, his family, his life, his future, it was time for him to take it all back. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, an alien figure emerged from the shadows, its gray-blue skin shimmering in the dim light. Her slender body moved gracefully, her dark eyes locked onto as she approached. She had been his ally from the start, though her motivations remained a mystery. Her name was, and she had been helping him navigate this planet for far longer than he cared to admit. She had saved his life more than once, and now she had one question for him. "No one wins with one arm," said softly, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Turned toward her, a wry smile forming on his face. His jaw clenched as he adjusted the grip on his prosthetic. The weight of his past and the burden of this war pressed heavily on him. The pain was constant, but so was the anger. He nodded, eyes filled with determination. "Good, I'm not here to win, I'm here to end them." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Studied him for a moment, her alien face unreadable, before turning her gaze to the looming fortress ahead. "You know what will happen if you fail," she said, her voice tight with tension. "They will destroy everything." His grin faded as he looked into her eyes. He had seen the fear behind them, the same fear he carried every day. They both knew the stakes. "I don't plan to fail," he replied, his voice firm, "and neither do you." Didn't answer. Instead, she turned away, her fingers brushing against a small device strapped to her wrist. A faint humming sound filled the air, and a holographic map of the stronghold flickered into view. "We'll need to disable their defenses first," she said. "It won't be easy, but it's our only chance." His gaze shifted back to the fortress. The outer walls were heavily fortified, guarded by automated turrets and drones that patrolled the area. Inside, the elite would be waiting, along with their propaganda machine, their iron grip over the planet's inhabitants. He clenched his fist around the prosthetic arm, feeling the pressure against his metal fingers. "Let's get to work." Without another word, the two of them moved toward the edge of the desert, where a narrow ravine would lead them into the heart of enemy territory. The ground beneath them shifted, and the low rumble of distant thunder vibrated through their boots. It was no natural storm. They were preparing for something big, something that would change the course of this conflict, but didn't care. They had no time to waste. They had to strike now. As they approached the ravine, the sound of rapid movement reached his ears. He motioned for to stop, and they both crouched behind a pile of broken rocks. Through the dust, a group of soldiers emerged, their sleek armored bodies barely visible in the swirling storm. They moved with practiced precision, their weapons scanning the terrain for any sign of intruders. His heart pounded. His mission had just become more dangerous than he had anticipated. His hand fell on his shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. "Wait for the signal." Nodded, his mind racing. He was used to waiting, used to staying hidden. But today there was no room for error. If they didn't act soon, everything they had fought for would be lost. A tense silence stretched between them as the soldiers moved closer. His hand hovered over the weapon at his side, his prosthetic fingers itching for the chance to fire. He knew the plan. Take out the guards, disable the turrets, and then infiltrate the fortress. Easy. But every part of him, every instinct he had, told him this mission was about to go south. "Now," whispered, her voice filled with urgency. In an instant, everything went to chaos. The ravine was narrow, its walls steep and jagged, and pressed their bodies against the cold stone, the wind howling above them as the soldiers closed in. He could feel the vibration of their heavy boots against the earth, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond their cover. His heart raced, every muscle tense as he counted the seconds. His fingers brushed against his arm, a silent signal that she was ready. Without a word, pulled his blaster from its holster, the metal cold against his palm. He could hear the faint hum of the weapon charging as his finger hovered over the trigger. The moment was almost here. 3, 2, 1. The moment gave the signal. She surged forward, her movements as smooth as water. Her alien agility was impressive, a blur of motion as she slid between rocks and out into the open, catching the first guard off guard. She pressed her hand against his chest, and in a fluid motion, a crackling energy field shot out, disabling the soldier's armor and leaving him frozen in place, helpless. He fell to the ground with a grunt, unconscious. Followed close behind, not wasting a second. His prosthetic arm shifted as he activated a hidden blade that extended from his forearm, sharp and deadly. The next soldier didn't even see him coming. With a swift move, sliced through the air, the blade catching the soldier's throat. Blood splattered across the rocks as the soldier crumpled, lifeless. Clear muttered under his breath. Didn't respond. Her eyes scanned the horizon, her senses always alert. She could hear things that couldn't, small changes in the wind, the shifting of sand underfoot. But in this moment, she wasn't focused on the distant sounds of an approaching enemy. She was focused on him. "You're not invincible," she said quietly, her voice filled with concern. Didn't flinch. He was used to hearing that from her. But he knew the truth. No one was invincible, not even him. But he couldn't afford to think about that now. There were more pressing matters at hand. "Just stay focused," he replied, his voice low and steady. "We've still got work to do." They moved quickly, weaving through the ravine's narrow path until they reached the base of the fortress. It loomed above them like a monstrous beast, its towering spires reaching for the sky. The symbol, a black and red sigil, adorned the outer walls. It was a grim reminder of the oppression they had spread across the planet. "This is it," said her voice cold. "The main entrance is guarded by a reinforced shield. We need to get past it before reinforcements arrive." Surveyed the structure, looking for any weakness. The wall was solid, a wall of metal and energy that pulsed with power. But even this advanced technology had its flaws. Eyes narrowed as he noticed a small, blinking light on the far side of the wall, a maintenance panel left unguarded. His plan was simple. "I'll take care of this," he said, nodding toward the panel. "You cover me." Without waiting for her response, darted across the open ground, moving swiftly but quietly. He knew the risks. Every second brought the potential for disaster. His mind raced with calculations as he reached the panel, his fingers moving to open it. A soft hiss echoed as the panel slid open, revealing a tangled mess of wires and circuitry. His prosthetic arm extended, its precision tools clicking into place. His heart pounded in his chest as he began to work, bypassing the security protocols with practiced ease. His hands were steady, but his mind was clouded with anger that would not subside until they were destroyed. He could hear movements behind him, but her presence barely registered. He focused solely on the task at hand, his fingers moving like lightning across the wires. Sparks flew, and the faint hum of the wall's shield faltered. "Got it," he muttered. The shield deactivated with a sudden silence, the massive door before them now vulnerable. He quickly motioned for her to join him. She wasted no time, slipping through the opening with the elegance of a predator on the hunt. "Stay close," warned, his eyes scanning the darkened interior of the fortress. The walls were lined with alien symbols, the harsh glow of neon lighting casting eerie shadows across the metal floors. The air was thick with the smell of oil and machinery, the distant hum of an engine running deep within the heart of the fortress. "Can you feel it?" His voice broke the silence. "The tension, the fear." Nodded, his pulse quickening as they made their way deeper into the fortress. They were no longer just a faceless enemy. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they had no intention of letting him walk out of here alive. A faint noise echoed down the hall, a footstep, then another and another. Froze, his senses on high alert, he motioned for to stop. They were not alone. From the shadows ahead, a figure appeared, moving swiftly. It was tall, imposing, and dressed in black armor, the distinctive markings of an elite soldier. The soldier didn't hesitate, drawing his weapon and aiming directly at Without thinking's prosthetic arm shifted. The blade extended once more. He had no time for negotiations, no room for mercy. The soldier fired. The sound of the soldier's blaster echoed through the narrow corridor, its bright beam searing the air as it raced toward. Time seemed to stretch in that instant, every movement a split-second decision. His instincts kicked in before his brain could even process the threat. He dove to the side, his prosthetic arm springing into action. The blade extended, cutting through the air with a sharp hiss. The soldier's blaster shot missed by inches, grazing the edge of his shoulder. He gritted his teeth against the searing pain but didn't falter. He couldn't afford to. The soldier adjusted his aim, eyes narrowing beneath his helmet. His prosthetic arm moved with precision, the blade slashing toward the soldier's midsection. But the enemy was fast, faster than anticipated. The soldier ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the attack, and retaliated with a brutal kick to his chest, sending him crashing into the wall. The impact rattled his bones, but grinned through the pain. This wasn't the first time he'd fought like this. His world was no longer defined by the limits of his body, but by his will to survive. The soldier advanced, his heavy boots thudding against the floor. His vision blurred, but he could see movements out of the corner of his eye, graceful, calculated. She had already drawn her energy blade, the crackling weapon humming in her hands. With a swift lunge, she struck, aiming for the soldier's unprotected side. But the soldier wasn't the only one who was fast. In a blur, he heard her strike, the metal blade clashing against his reinforced armor. He retaliated with a spinning move, knocking off balance. She stumbled, but before she could regain her footing, the soldier lunged forward with his own blade drawn, aiming for her throat. His mind snapped into action. "No," he shouted. With a snarl, he pushed off the wall, his prosthetic arm activating a retractable chain from his wrist. The chain shot forward, coiling around the soldier's weapon in a blur of motion. The soldier's blade was ripped from his grasp, sent spinning through the air. The soldier's shock was brief, but enough for her to regain her balance. She lunged again, using her agility to her advantage, and her energy blade pierced the soldier's armor at a weak point. He gasped, his eyes wide beneath his helmet. For a moment, everything seemed to slow. The soldier's knees buckled, and he crumpled to the ground with a heavy thud. But it wasn't over. Stepped back, wiping the sweat from her brow, her breathing ragged. "We need to move, they'll hear this." Nodded, pulling himself to his feet, his body aching but his determination burning brighter than ever. He shot a quick glance down the hall. There was no time to waste. "We go deeper," he said, his voice sharp with urgency. "We have to get to the heart of their operations." As they continued forward, the fortress seemed to shift around them, dark corridors, flickering lights, and the growing hum of something vast and mechanical. His mind raced, trying to keep up with their progress. But with every step, the weight of their mission pressed down harder. He couldn't allow himself to think about what would happen if they failed. His eyes flicked toward the next set of doors, which led into the inner sanctum of the command center. The security was here, no simple access points or maintenance panels. It was all high-tech, sealed shut, and reinforced with layers of defenses. "I'll handle the locks," said, already reaching for a small device strapped to her belt. Before could respond, an alarm blared, its sound deafening. Red lights began to flash, casting an ominous glow over the hallway. "Too late," muttered, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. "We're not done yet," said, voice steady. She tapped a few keys on her device, and the doors hissed open, revealing the heart of the operation. A massive, well-lit chamber filled with terminals and holographic displays. Inside, several officers were gathered, their attention focused on a central console. They were completely unaware of the intruders until stepped into the room. The officers froze, their eyes narrowing. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. His pulse quickened, and in a flash, all of his instincts were firing. He raised his weapon, firing a shot at one of the officers who tried to reach for a nearby alarm. The officer crumpled to the ground. Chaos erupted. Darted forward, her movements as fluid as water, her energy blade flashing through the air. She cleaved through one of the guards, her blade striking with precision. But there were more, too many more. The soldiers began to scramble for cover, returning fire with their advanced blasters. His prosthetic arm shifted again. He unclipped a grenade from his belt and tossed it toward a group of soldiers. There was a flash of light as it detonated, sending shockwaves through the room. Debris flew, and the soldiers were knocked off their feet. But the enemy had reinforcements. As and took cover behind a column, more soldiers poured into the room. Their weapons trained on the two intruders, their movements synchronized with terrifying precision. "We're outnumbered," said, gritting her teeth. Her gaze flicked to, "We need to move now." Glanced at the nearest exit. They could escape, but the mission was far from over. They had to do more than just survive. They had to destroy the command center, disable their ability to fight back. Knew it was all or nothing. They had one shot. "Get ready," he said, his voice tight. "We push through." Eyes locked onto his, together. Didn't hesitate, always. The two of them surged forward, their movements coordinated, striking with lethal precision. But the soldiers were well trained. They fought back with an intensity that nearly overwhelmed them. And then, just as they thought they were gaining ground, a new sound echoed in the room, something far more terrifying than the blasters and grenades. A voice, booming and resonant, filled the chamber. "Well, well, it seems we have guests." The voice echoed off the walls, its deep resonance vibrating through the floor and into his chest. The figure that stepped into view was unlike any soldier they had encountered before. Tall, imposing, his black and red armor gleamed in the dim light. His helmet was sleek, but the visor was transparent, allowing them to see the chilling, unblinking eyes of the creature behind it. "I'm impressed," the figure said, his voice dripping with a sense of superiority. "You managed to get this far, but this is where your journey ends." His grip tightened on his blaster, his mind racing. Whoever this was, he wasn't just a soldier. He was something more. A commander, perhaps, or even a leader within the hierarchy. The way he stood, the way his presence seemed to command the room, it was clear that the stakes had just been raised to a terrifying level. His energy blade hummed in her hands, but even she looked wary, her alien features betraying a flicker of hesitation. The commander stepped closer, his boots making a hollow echo with each step. "I am," he said, "and you are trespassing in the heart of my empire." Felt the weight of his words. This wasn't just a skirmish anymore, it was a battle for the future of this planet. They had crushed any hope of resistance for too long, but with here, it seemed like their mission had just become even more impossible. "Is that supposed to scare us?" spat, his voice laced with defiance. "You're just another piece of the puzzle I'm about to destroy." His eyes gleamed with something between amusement and disdain. "Destroy me? You misunderstand, human. I am the final piece you will never reach." Before could respond, raised his hand. The air in the room thickened, and an intense, invisible force slammed into his chest, sending him sprawling backward. His body collided with a metal column, and the air was knocked from his lungs. He gasped for breath, his vision blurring. Reacted instantly, her blade swinging toward in a blur of light. But the commander didn't move. Instead, he extended his other hand, and the air around him twisted. His energy blade slowed, as if an unseen force was pushing against it. She gritted her teeth, but despite her strength, her attack was halted. "Impressive," remarked, his voice calm as though this was all just a game. "But your weapons are no match for my power." Struggled to regain his breath, his body aching from the force of his power. He had faced countless enemies, but nothing like this. This wasn't just brute strength, it was something more profound, something beyond mere physical combat. Lowered his hand, and the air pressure returned to normal. He stepped forward, towering over both and. "You think you can stop with a few explosions and a little rebellion? You are nothing but ants beneath my feet. You may have made it this far, but you will never break us. You will never break me." Slowly stood, his mind racing. He couldn't let fear take root, not now. They were on the brink of finishing what they had started. They had come too far to let stand in their way, but it was clear that brute force wouldn't work against him. His voice broke through his thoughts. "He's right, we can't overpower him, we need to be smarter." His mind began to churn, the pieces of the plan falling into place. He had to be precise, focused, and quick. He could see the smirk on his face as if the commander could feel his hesitation. "I'll create a diversion," said suddenly. "You take him out." Looked at her, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his mind. "What are you talking about?" Laughed, a low, menacing sound. "You'll need more than clever tricks to defeat me, little alien." Didn't seem to care about taunts, she simply nodded. "Trust me." Knew that trusting her was the only option they had left, but time was running out. His posture shifted slightly, sensing the change in the air. "You think you can outsmart me? You're both naive." The commander's hand raised again, and a wave of crushing force shot forward, targeting both, and it was too fast, too powerful. But before the pressure could land, reacted in an instant. She threw herself at the ground, using her alien agility to roll out of the way. His mind moving in overdrive, dove in the opposite direction, narrowly avoiding the blast. They were separated now, and that might have been their only chance. So tension was now divided. "Go," yelled from across the room, her voice strained but filled with determination. "Now." Didn't hesitate, he knew what he had to do. There was no turning back now. He bolted forward, his prosthetic arm retracting the chain. It shot out again, but this time it was aimed at the central core of armor. His goal was clear: disable the commander's control over the battlefield. As neared, the commander's eyes locked onto him, a flash of realization crossing his face. He moved to strike, but was faster. The chain wrapped around's leg, and with a forceful pull, yanked the commander off balance. Stumbled, but he didn't fall. Snarled in fury, "You dare!" Before could recover was upon him. She had used the momentary distraction to her advantage, moving with lethal grace as she lunged at once again. Her blade met his armor, but this time it wasn't blocked. She had found the weak point. With a hiss, her blade drove deep into the armor's chest plate. Roared in pain, stumbling back. The force of the blow didn't kill him, but it shattered his composure. His hands reached for the wound, but wasn't done. His eyes widened as he saw the opening, was vulnerable. With one swift motion, took the shot. His blaster's blast hit in the chest. The commander staggered backward, eyes wide with shock. The blast was not enough to end him, but it bought them the precious time they needed. For a moment, said nothing. His helmet cracked slightly from the impact of the shot, and he seemed to falter, his body trembling as he tried to gather his strength. Stood ready, her eyes hard. Finish it. But before could strike again, let out a violent, guttural scream, his body pulsing with an unnatural energy. He reached out, his hands glowing with power. "You will all die," bellowed, his voice now filled with raw, uncontrollable rage. Felt the ground shake as the room's temperature suddenly spiked. The force of his energy was overwhelming, but this time and were ready. They had one final shot. The chamber trembled, the air vibrating with the sheer force of his anger. His glowing hands sparked with dangerous energy, the power radiating from him like an unstoppable storm. His chest heaved as he struggled to remain standing, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, never left and "Finish it," had said, but was beginning to doubt if this battle could be finished at all. Was far beyond anything they had anticipated. Raised his hands, and the temperature in the room spiked even further. The walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy as he gathered his strength, his body glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. Sparks flew from his fingertips, and the air itself crackled with static. "You think you can kill me so easily?" sneered, his voice low but filled with fury. "I am the end of everything you hold dear. You cannot win against me, not now, not ever." His mind raced. He couldn't keep talking. He couldn't let him gain any more control over the battlefield. But the commander wasn't just powerful, he was a master of manipulation. He'd already planted seeds of doubt in his mind, and the longer they stood there, the more those seeds would grow. But he couldn't let that happen, not here, not now. "Stay low," barked, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. He needed to act fast. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the future of the planet. Its energy surged outward like a tidal wave, crashing into the walls and scattering debris across the room, and were forced to dive for cover as the force of the blast shook the very foundations of the fortress. The walls groaned under the pressure, cracks spiderwebbing across the metal. Rolled to her feet quickly, her energy blade crackling with intensity. "We need to break him," she said through gritted teeth, eyes locked on who was now hovering inches above the ground, surrounded by a glowing aura of pure energy. His power isn't just in his armor, it's in his mind. He controls the energy of this place. His mind clicked into overdrive, was right. The technology, the defenses, everything about the fortress was tied to energy manipulation. If they could disrupt that, they could defeat him. But how? He scanned the room, looking for any weaknesses. The energy beams that was wielding seemed to originate from a massive console at the back of the room, one that was humming with power and surrounded by intricate wires and alien machinery. I know how we can take him down, said, his voice firm with determination. I'll hit the console, you cover me. Gave him a sharp, questioning glance, but there was no time for explanation. Do it. The two of them moved with practiced precision. Dashed for the console, ducking and weaving to avoid the bursts of energy was throwing in his direction. Each time, the air would snap with electricity, leaving scorched marks on the walls and floors. Meanwhile was engaged in a fierce battle with. She wasn't attacking directly. She was evading, dancing around his blows with fluid movements that showed the true extent of her alien agility. Every time swung at her, she was a step ahead, her blade deflecting his attacks, her body constantly shifting and swaying to stay out of his reach. But was relentless. He swung his fists forward, creating ripples in the air with each movement. Every strike sent shockwaves that rattled the entire room. Was starting to tire, her breathing quickening, but she knew she couldn't stop. Not yet. Reached the console. The hum of the machinery grew louder in his ears, a deep, throbbing sound that made his teeth rattle. He saw the weak point immediately, a glowing energy core at the center of the console, pulsating like a heart. Got it, muttered under his breath. His prosthetic arm extended, and with swift precision, he drove a hacking tool into the console's control panel. Sparks flew, and the machinery hummed violently in response. His heart pounded, but he didn't pull away. He knew that if he didn't disable the console now, they were done. Turned toward him, sensing the disturbance. His eyes narrowed with fury. No, he growled, you cannot do this. But it was already too late. The console erupted with a brilliant flash of light as the energy core overloaded. A shockwave of raw power shot out in every direction, throwing off his feet and slamming him into the ground. He could barely see, the world around him swirling with brilliant light and deafening sound. Screamed his name, but her voice was drowned out by the explosion. When the light faded and the noise subsided, found himself lying on the floor, his head spinning. His vision blurred, and for a moment he couldn't move. But then he heard it, a soft beeping sound, a small click of machinery struggling to function. The console was still active, but only just. The energy flow had been disrupted, and the feedback had caused a chain reaction that was slowly destabilizing his control. Pushed himself to his knees, his body protesting with every movement. His prosthetic arm was smoking from the strain of the overload, but it still functioned. He forced himself to his feet, eyes locking onto, who was now staggering back, the aura of power around him flickering and dimming. You think you've won? Spat, his voice ragged. His glowing hands trembled as he tried to focus his energy. This isn't over, human. His breath came in heavy gasps as he moved toward the commander. He was wounded but not defeated. The tide was turning and he wasn't going to stop now. We're just getting started, said, his voice cold with determination. Her energy blade, now flickering with a dying light, joined him, her face set in grim determination. She said, "This is where it ends." Looked between them, his eyes burning with hatred. But for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He knew his time was running out. The energy in the room was slowly draining, the feedback from the console's overload weakening his power. Reached for his blaster. He wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. Staggered, his once imposing figure now faltering. The energy coursing through his body flickered and sputtered like a dying flame. But the look in his eyes was still the same, cold, calculating, and filled with venom. He wasn't finished. Not yet. His blaster was in his hand, aimed squarely at its chest, but his finger hesitated on the trigger. He had learned over the years that the moment you thought you had an enemy cornered was the moment they were most dangerous. Let out a low, guttural laugh, one that echoed around the room, the sound laced with desperation. You think you've beaten me? He rasped, his body still pulsing with dying energy. I am the will of the you can't kill me. No one can. Stepped forward, her energy blade dim, but her resolve as strong as ever. She was breathing heavily, her alien form showing the strain of the prolonged battle, but her eyes were locked on. You've lost. Your empire is crumbling. Your people will never follow a broken leader. His eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a snarl. You don't understand. This isn't about power. This is about survival. We are the future. We will take what is ours. His words were filled with venom, but there was something else there too, fear. For the first time could see it, fear of defeat, fear of losing control. You're not the future, said, his voice cold and steady. You're a monster holding on to the past. For a moment was silent. His eyes flicked between and searching for some way to turn the tide. His hands trembled, the energy that had once surged through him now faltering, growing weaker. The overload had taken its toll. His once invincible aura was now reduced to a flickering glow. His gaze turned dark, filled with pure hatred. "I'll show you what true power is." With a roar, he lunged forward, his hands glowing with the last of his strength, reaching for and... Everything happened in an instant. His attack was vicious, faster than anything they had seen from him before. The air crackled with energy as he thrust his hands forward. Barely had time to react, but instinct took over. He dove to the side, using the last bit of his energy to avoid the blast that followed him. However, was quicker. Her energy blade flared to life again, brighter than ever, and she swung it with deadly precision. It clashed with his glowing hands, and for a moment the room was filled with a blinding flash of light. The force of their collision sent shockwaves through the room, rattling the walls and causing the already unstable structure to groan in protest. Scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew they couldn't keep this up for much longer. The commander was running on sheer desperation, and that made him more dangerous than ever. His energy blade flickered. The feedback from his energy was draining her too. She could feel it, but she wasn't about to give up. "You can't win," hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "I am the last hope of my people. You humans don't understand what we can do. The galaxy will kneel before us." "Not today," said, taking aim at once again. He fired. The blast hit square in the chest, but it didn't bring him down. Instead, the impact knocked him back several feet, sending him crashing into one of the control panels. Sparks erupted as the console exploded, sending a wave of electrical energy cascading through the room. Staggered to his feet, his body trembling with the strain of the blast and the overloaded console. His armor was damaged, and the energy flowing through him was barely holding together, but he wasn't done yet. Moved quickly, stepping in front of her energy blade at the ready. She stood tall, facing head-on despite the visible exhaustion in her limbs. "This ends now." Growled, his fists clenched as he himself for another attack. But before he could move, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath them trembled again, but this time it wasn't from power. It was from something much larger. A low, mechanical rumble filled the room, followed by the unmistakable sound of a heavy object moving toward them. And both turned toward the source of the noise, their eyes widening in disbelief. A massive structure, once hidden beneath the floor, began to rise. It was a ship large enough to fill the entire chamber. This true weapon the one had been keeping hidden. It was not just a ship, it was a weapon of unimaginable destruction. "No," whispered, his voice trailing off in horror. Seeing the ship rise, smiled in grim satisfaction. "You see, you can't stop us. This is the future, the ultimate power that will take over everything." His eyes darted from the ship too, and for a brief moment could see her hesitate. She was calculating, her mind working at lightning speed. Didn't have time for hesitation. "We can't let him finish this. We have to take the ship out before it's too late." Nodded, her determination shining through. She turned back to face, the light of her energy blade brightening again. "This is it." The two of them moved forward, side by side, their resolve unwavering. Would not win, not this time. They had come too far. But as they approached, the ship's weapon systems came online. A low hum filled the air, and suddenly the entire chamber was bathed in blinding light. Laughed a cruel, triumphant sound. "You can't stop us, you never could." But wasn't listening to his taunts anymore. With a final, focused strike, she hurled herself at, energy blade extended. Dove for cover, his mind focused on the one thing that could end this nightmare. The control console. He ran for it, his body screaming in protest, but he didn't stop. Not now. He had to end this. His mind raced as he sprinted toward the console, his feet pounding against the metal floor. The massive ship was rising into the heart of the chamber, its weapon systems activating one by one. The room shook with each hum of power, the walls vibrating as the ship's energy surged to life. There was no time to think, no time to second-guess himself. If he didn't shut it down now, everything they'd fought for would be reduced to rubble. He could hear his voice behind him, mocking, venomous. "You can't escape it, human. This is the end." But didn't listen to him? He couldn't. All that mattered now was reaching that control console. Every step felt like an eternity as the ship's weapons powered up, the room filling with an overwhelming sense of impending doom. Was still battling, her energy blade flashing with each strike, but even she was beginning to struggle. Power was far from gone, and his brutal counterattacks were pushing her to her limits. He was stronger, faster, and more relentless than she had ever anticipated. But she wasn't going to stop, not when the stakes were this high. "Move," shouted, his voice strained as he reached the console. His hand flew to the controls, fingers dancing over the holographic panel. Sparks crackled, the interface flickering as the technology resisted his attempts to override it. His prosthetic arm, shaking from exhaustion, slammed against the console in frustration. "I can't hold him off much longer," his voice rang out behind him. The sound of metal crashing echoed through the room and knew that she was being pushed to her breaking point. He gritted his teeth and hit another sequence on the panel, desperate to disable the ship's systems. The machinery hummed louder, and then, finally, the console beeped, confirmation that his hacking attempt was working. But then the lights flickered. His laugh echoed again, now laced with anger. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with." His heart dropped as he realized the console wasn't responding as it should. The overload had caused the systems to go into lockdown, and now they were fighting against time. And "I'm not done," muttered to himself, a fierce determination flooding his chest. His roar filled the room as he finally broke free from his defenses. He moved toward, his eyes burning with fury. His armor crackled with power, and he was no longer concerned with the ship. He wanted its blood. The ground shook again as energy surged toward, a brutal wave of raw force. Stumbled back, but he couldn't afford to dodge. He had to finish this. Just as reached him, lunged forward, slamming into the commander with the full weight of her body. The impact threw off balance, his energy blast narrowly missing his head. "Now," shouted. Didn't hesitate. He turned, aiming his blaster at the now unguarded core of the ship's control console. With one final focused shot, he fired. The blast hit the heart of the ship's core with a deafening explosion. The entire room seemed to shake as the ship's systems overloaded. Sparks flew from every corner, and the lights flickered once more before going dark. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the entire fortress groaned. The ship trembled and began to fall back into the ground, its systems collapsing one by one. The dark hum of energy faded, replaced by the deep, ominous creak of the failing structure. The fortress was crumbling around them. And exchanged a single, brief glance. "There's no time," said, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to go now." But was still standing, his body heaving with exertion and rage. The damage to his armor was severe, and the glow from his hands was barely a flicker now. But he wasn't finished. His hand gripped the blaster again, but this time, he didn't aim it at the console. His eyes burned with defiance as he staggered toward them, his body shaking with the last of his power. "You will never win." But before he could finish his sentence, was already in motion. She closed the distance between them with terrifying speed, her energy blade cutting through the air with surgical precision. In one fluid motion, she disarmed, his weapon falling to the ground with a loud clang. Staggered back, his eyes wide with shock. "No," he whispered, "you can't do this." Didn't wait for his surrender. With one swift strike, she plunged the blade deep into his chest. His body convulsed as the energy from his armor and his own power finally shut down. His eyes, once filled with unyielding fury, went glassy and still. Fell to the ground with a soft thud. For a moment there was only silence. The battle was over. His heart pounded in his chest as he stared at its fallen form. It was hard to believe it was finally done. For so long, he had been consumed by the need for revenge, for justice. But now that it was over, he felt an emptiness he hadn't expected. Stood beside him, her energy blade flickering before fatting. Her face, usually unreadable, showed a flicker of relief. "It's over," she said softly, almost to herself. Nodded, but his gaze was distant. "Is it?" For the first time, his expression softened. "For us, maybe, but for the rest of the galaxy, it's just the beginning." Looked at her, understanding what she meant. The might have fallen, but the galaxy was vast, and other dangers lurked in its corners. This wasn't the end of their fight, it was just a new chapter. But for now, they had won. As the ship continued to collapse around them, they turned and made their way toward the exit, the rumbling of the fortress growing louder with each passing second. Didn't look back. There was nothing left to see and nothing left to do. The sun had started to rise outside, casting a golden light over the ruins. The world was still, but the future was uncertain. They had taken down one tyrant, but the galaxy was full of more, and was ready to face whatever came next.